Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you all to our Learn Lunch webinar. And today we will hear from doctoral student Jordan Schuler as he discusses stress and mental health on the farm. You may ask questions through the chat window by clicking the chat button at the bottom of the screen. More information on this and other farm management topics may be found on the eFarm Management page. I will share this link in the chat window. Jordan, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. I'm glad to talk to everybody. So a little bit of self-disclosure. I did not grow up on a farm, but I grew up with a dad who did grow up on a farm. My grandpa was a farmer in Utah. And so he grew up doing what I know a lot of farmers do, where he had a job teaching and he also ran, I think, a laundromat, and then did every bit of his spare time was out on the farm. And that was all of my dad and his siblings too. So I grew up on stories about farming and farm stress, and then had the pleasure to move to Oklahoma when I was an adult. And then I got introduced to a whole bunch of wonderful people that have taught me a lot more than I ever thought I could know. But you'll notice probably sometimes might not totally match with your own experiences. And what I want to really communicate is that I'll speak to the stress on farming life and what that does for mental health. But I realize that I'm talking to people that know more of the ins and outs of what is stressful on the farm than I ever can. But I still believe that some of the principles that I talk about, and especially the ones that are focused on family health and what that has to do with mental health, will be a key to maintaining your own well-being and the well-being of your family. So, Oklahoma specifically has been in this long burn of essentially a mental health crisis. The charts I have up here that you'll see are a little dated, but I looked at some stuff recently and it hasn't really changed. So, many of our rural counties have high rates of risk for suicide and substance abuse disorders, and lots of other kind of mental health related things like cardiovascular health challenges. And I think that a reflective challenge is, so this is kind of across the state, we just have a lot of challenges that we grapple with in Oklahoma. But the biggest concentration of mental health providers and frankly medical providers is kind of around here, around Oklahoma City and surrounding areas, and then around Tulsa and surrounding areas. And much of the rest of the state is in something of a mental health coverage desert, which makes it hard to get the help that we need when there are mental health challenges that come up. Additionally, a lot of us in rural counties and in rural areas survive on kind of a sense of grit and, frankly, the need to be able to do things on your own. There's a lot of times when there just isn't immediate help for challenges, and so you've learned over time to tackle stuff on your own. And in some ways, that kind of attitude is probably what keeps you going day in and day out in a stressful environment. But the flip side, the dark side to that, is we know that folks that grow up in rural areas tend to have a harder time talking through their own mental health challenges. That usually, or often at least, isn't part of the language that we use with each other. And all of this together contributes to just these really high rates of challenges that we've identified with mental health. So I'm not going to go too much into the specifics of what causes stress on a farm because, again, you know more about that than I could. We have the challenge that kind of coincides with natural disasters. We've had a lot of rain recently, which has been awesome for a lot of farmers, but that also can lead to problems with flooding. It's kind of a double-edged sword again. We have a long history of having issues with fires in the state, and that's not to mention things about like commodity prices going up. People are having a hard time on the economic end, both on the selling and the buying. So that's this death, divorce, disease, disaster, and disability is kind of the pithy way of talking about some of the common challenges that rural families face. What I want to talk about is more on the conceptual level of what causes stress. So if you look at my kind of simple diagram here, we can think of stress being affected by a combination of the actual events we live through. That's more like these things up here. The way that we perceive or think about or interpret the stresses that come up, and then the resources that we have on hand to work through the challenges as they come up. So, um, when I talk about an event or a situation, like I said, that's kind of this set up here. And we really just a lot of times don't have a lot of control over them. So I'm a big believer in if there's an easy way to get rid of something in life that is creating a lot of stress for us, the easiest way to lower stress and to manage mental health is sometimes just to drop things that you can. So if there are extra obligations or extra challenges or extra things on your plate, and it makes sense for you and your family to be able to lessen the load, that might be the easiest way to bring down the level of stress that feeds into these mental health challenges. But obviously, a lot of things are just out of our control. There's things that impact farm families at the federal level, at the state level, at the level of Mother Nature. And then, there's just the seasons come and go. There's challenges with livestock and with crops. And most of that we can't do too much about directly. And so the challenge is, how do we use perceptions and resources in a way that can actually lower stress? And you'll notice I have over here this part of the diagram. You have like this low level of stress. So this would be you have a difficult event or situation come up, and you don't perceive it as very threatening. You have plenty of resources to manage it. Think about, like, I always think about when I have like car problems. If I have a check engine light come on, that's an event or situation I might not have a lot of control over. But when I've got plenty of money in the bank, and when I don't have anywhere urgent to get and I have time to get my car fixed, I actually have a pretty low degree of stress about that check engine light. When my bank account is tight, and when I'm in a big hurry to get somewhere, that check engine light coming on might send me to a higher level of stress, even though it's the same event. And when I talk about mental health issues, and I'll get to that a bit more specifically in the next slide, but you might consider that a place at where stress goes from like a normal, manageable, if unpleasant place to where there's this actual kind of breaking in our well-being. And sometimes we might call that a mental health crisis or having a mental health disorder. But really, a lot of these are tied into things, whether you're on the low or the high end. The difference often is in what the perception and resources you have on hand to manage the stress when it comes up. So a lot of our focus also will be on how to manage perceptions and resources in new and different ways. So when I talk about what a substance use or a mood or mental health disorder is, a lot of times we use that language, people like me, professionals in the mental health field or in social science, but we don't often, in my profession, do a great job of communicating what that is. And so sometimes there's kind of a misconception. When I say that there is a mental health or a mental health crisis or a mood disorder, that's actually pretty specific language that comes from this idea that when you have symptoms like anxiety or depression, those are common words. We've all experienced them some, and to different degrees. I'm kind of a high-strung, anxious person. I sort of ride on a high of anxiety a lot. But that doesn't mean I have all the time what you would call like an anxiety mental health disorder. And similarly with depression, we're familiar with loss and sadness and kind of a lack of energy that comes when there's just a big pileup of stuff going on. And that doesn't always mean that you have what we would call a mental health disorder. When we talk about a mental health disorder, what we mean is that those symptoms of being nervous and being sad, to use the more common language, when they build up so much, let me go back to the other slide, that we reach from this point of it's high to where there's a crisis. And by crisis, I mean it's impacting our ability to get up and go to work in the morning. It's impacting our ability to get along with romantic partners or with children. Maybe it's impacting your ability to be engaged in a church community or at other things that you do in your life that bring you a lot of joy. When you start having a hard time being involved in those, it might be because the sadness, the anxiousness have built up so much that it is literally impacting your ability to engage in the things that you normally would. So that's what I say when they overwhelm you, we go from calling it just kind of regular anxiety and depression to being a mental health disorder. And we see a lot of overlap between these anxiety and depression type things and use of substances, which again is a big challenge that we have in Oklahoma. We have high rates of overdose. We have a lot of challenges right now with opioids. And some of that doesn't have to do with mental health. It's not a perfect overlap. But a fair amount of the challenges that we struggle are when the use of substances, drugs, or alcohol, they often act to help in the short term manage some of these just massive feelings of being overwhelmed. But in the long term, especially when we go from kind of regular use into overuse or misuse of substances, that often happens because we're trying really hard to manage the distress that we're under or that our family or the farm is under. And then we get the kind of the quick relief that comes, and very effective quick relief that comes from using substances. But when that builds up and that becomes our main way of coping, that often overwhelms the other things that we might do to try and manage stress. And then in the long term, adds in a new layer of stress that ends up making the whole thing harder to manage. And the real kicker is a lot of times that gets locked into a habit. And so then you this nasty cycle of substance use mixed with anxiety and depression, and they kind of reinforce each other. And that can be really hard to break out of that unless you do something different than what you've normally done to manage stress or distress in the past. Another note here, and the reason I have this image of an iceberg in the background, by the way, I tried to find like a cooler real image of an iceberg, but you have to pay for all of them. So I just went with this kind of free animated colored one. Anyway, so icebergs, a kind of cool fact about them is a huge chunk of their overall mass lies underneath the surface. It's not visible if you're like on a boat or in an airplane flying over the water. You just see kind of this upper peak. And you can think about that in being like when families are in crisis or even when individuals are having a mental health crisis. A lot of times there's so much happening under the surface that goes into it that we just can't see on the outside. And the things that we can see on the outside sometimes don't tell the whole picture. So this upper part might be what you notice if somebody seems a little extra sad or a little extra anxious than usual. That doesn't always mean that there's a big iceberg's worth of problems underneath, but it can. And additionally, you might not have what we call a traditional mental health disorder, but that doesn't mean the stress and the anxiety and the sadness and the worry about the economy and the worry about the potential for losing a farm that's been in a family for generations. That doesn't mean that those aren't real and they don't create challenges, even if the way that it comes up out of the water isn't what we technically call a mental health disorder. So I'm going to kind of come back to this. I'm going to take a slight deviation. I work a lot in this realm of what I call family systems. It's kind of my actual area of study and expertise. So this is just kind of an internal social science way of talking about the way that humans and other things interact with each other in ways that are hard to understand when you look at somebody by themselves. So if I look at just one person and try and think about what affects that one person, I'm missing something really important in understanding why they might be experiencing a mental health challenge or missing important ways that we could actually improve a situation. And so one of our most important systems that we're in is our families and communities. So when there's one part of a family that's having a rough time, I like to think of it almost like there's gears in a clock. So as you know, when one gear shifts inside of a clock, it causes all the other gears to shift at the same time. And I think the same thing is kind of true in families, although it's a little bit less dramatic and obvious. Essentially, when there's one person that's not doing well, an adolescent that's having a rough time, a parent that's having a stressful time on the farm or having a mental health crisis, when there is that kind of shift in one place in the family, it creates this ripple effect. And whether we see it or not, everybody is influenced. And the same thing is true in communities. When communities are faced with challenges, they're a little bit more distant than families, maybe, but they often have ripple effects of one challenge happening in one area in the community, sort of rippling out everywhere else. the family system is an important place to look when we're trying to understand both the physical health and the mental health of an individual. Not only is looking at a problem in a family a way to say, oh, that might be a reason why we're seeing a mental health disorder or even just a lot of challenges around stress, but we also can say, if we can make a difference in a family, then maybe we can make a difference in mental and physical health too. And really, in some ways, I think that might be one of my main takeaways today is a lot of us are just going to have a hard time accessing things like therapy and other resources to manage stress and mental health challenges. I'm a big proponent of therapy. I think it can work wonders, both family therapy, individual therapy. There are a lot of avenues to explore that way, but I just recognize that a lot of times we don't have the time, the money, or the access to really get excellent mental health care. And so sometimes the best we can do and the thing that can make a big difference is to try and improve our relationships with the people that are closest to us. And really, in some ways, there's a lot of therapy out there that has that as the same end goal. Sometimes when like a family therapist is working with somebody, they're almost as interested in trying to help the whole family work a little bit better as they are on helping the person that's actually in the office with them. Because a lot of times, gains that you make in one-on-one therapy, they either don't last if the whole family doesn't have some sort of positive change, or you don't see the positive change in the individual unless things change in the bigger family context. So I want to think about this on two levels: building up yourself, taking genuine care of yourself, and then putting energy into improving your relationships. And these aren't mutually exclusive. Often, when you can improve yourself a little bit and you can make a difference in your own well being, it gives you something extra to give to your family and give to your communities. And then that feeds back into your own well being over time. And additionally, there are some things that you might not be able to totally manage with your own health. So, just for an example, I'm diabetic. I can't really change that on like a physical level, but how my diabetes impacts my health has a lot to do with my relationships. And so that can make a difference. When I improve the relationships with my family members, it eases off stress on me and it actually makes it easier to manage my own medical challenges. So I want to think about taking care of different parts of your life, your own self, as well as different parts of your family. If you're in a romantic relationship or you have a committed partner, keeping that relationship as healthy and as vibrant as possible has payoffs in how you are as a parent, and it has payoffs in how you do as an individual. And again, the same is true in reverse. If I improve my own well-being, often I'm able to be a more comforting, a more caring, and a more useful partner. And additionally, when I can work together with my partner, or if I'm a single parent or I'm divorced, if we can find ways to work together to help our kids and our kids do a little bit better, that often then feeds back into improving how we all are together. Some things that we often lose sight of, though, in the middle of stress are really the simple things that we can do. I say simple, not easy. The simple but sometimes difficult things we can do to take care of ourselves that then helps us in our families. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm talking things like making sure you get enough sleep. And I know that comes and goes at different times of the year. Sometimes there's things that come up you have to manage. And consistent goal to improve sleep can have big payoffs in your mental and physical health. Take care of your diet, making sure that you're getting the right balance of nutrition. You're not overeating or undereating or anything like that. That has real implications for how you are with your relationships with others. And then this point here, take care of your need for connectedness with others. And you see, I've crossed out on purpose the word in therapy, again, to reinforce if you don't have access to therapy, again, not discouraging therapy at all, but if you don't have access to it, taking care of your need to connect with others and not neglecting that. Another one of these kinds of nasty cycles, especially with depression, is that depression often makes it hard for us to engage with others. Anxiety can do this too. It makes it so you want to withdraw, be by yourself. And while on some level, sometimes taking time on your own is very healthy and very useful, when that becomes your main way of managing stress, you might find other relationships starting to fray. And then that just feeds back into the depression and into the anxiety. And again, we get this cycle of reinforcing challenges. So take care of your need to be connected. Be intentional about it. Try and find social groups, whether it's through a church or whether it's through an organization or anything else that lets you be with other people in a way that matters to you. And make the time to do that, even if you have to carve away time from other important parts of your life. And the same thing goes for relationships with family members. And I have this last point, using your thinking brain. Essentially, when we're in the middle of a challenge, we react more than we are proactive. We tend to react to stressful people. We might get more snippy as a partner or as a parent. We might be quicker to lash out. That's actually a very natural and normal response to a person that's under stress. And so actually exercising your kind of ability to slow down and be thoughtful and planful in how you talk and in how you interact with others, especially when things are challenging. And sometimes that maybe means taking a break from difficult conversations. It often means making sure you have enough rest so that you have kind of enough brain bandwidth, if you will, to be able to have difficult interactions without being lashing out and stuff like that. And additionally, earlier, so these are all, I consider those all resources. Earlier, remember, I talked about the importance of perception and resources. So resources are things like our relationships. It's the things like our own health. We often can't really directly impact how much money we have, but that's only one of several critical resources to our well-being. Other ones are things like our relationships that we can actively work to improve, and the little health things that we can actively do to make a big difference in the long run. A lot of this takes stepping out of the moment to moment into the big picture of our own well-being. And another one is thinking about perspectives. So I can't see anybody here, and that's okay. But I bet you that a number of you seeing this image saw a duck. And the ones that saw a duck probably think I'm losing my mind because they see a rabbit or a bunny. And the people that see a rabbit or a bunny or that see a duck often think that the other person is just not seeing the image correctly. The truth is, you can see both in here. And let me help with this a little bit. So if you see a bunny, try and imagine that you have the eye in the same place, but switch the direction of the head. So now this is the back of the head, and this becomes the the beak of the duck. And then vice versa. If you saw the duck, imagine these as kind of flipped around, and now these become the ears. That simple shift changes how you see this image. And it's an easy way to talk about the importance of changing perspectives. So I have a lot of thoughts, and hopefully you'll have access to these slides to think through more one-on-one what I mean by changing your perspective. But sometimes in a big way, changing perspective has to do with stepping out from the moment-to-moment stuff and looking at a big picture. And so I use this image to try and emphasize that. You can see a storm, maybe a scary storm in this picture, and that's totally real. I wouldn't argue with somebody that said they see a storm. I also see a sunrise and I see calm waters. And that's also true at the same time. So sometimes changing a perspective means widening your view from the moment to moment challenges into your life as context and all the things that are going in your life, and being able to make room for the stuff that is going right. Not in some kind of Pollyannish, naive, rose-colored glasses way where I'm ignoring real challenges. I'm talking about a broad, genuine perspective where you can take in a whole vista of life and recognize your place in it in the context of where you've been and where you're going, and knowing that there's a lot of room for change in positive ways, especially if you set your sails and go there intentionally. And again, I have some specifics in here, but the last point I want to make is this kind of, I ended on this note about being intentional. When you're thinking about ways to move forward, try and like when you're trying to think about ways to improve a relationship or improve your health, a lot of times we sort of get ourselves into trouble by being too general or too broad at the beginning. So I say, I think it was helpful for all of us to think about one small change that you can make to affect your physical health and your relationships. I pick one of each and make it as specific and realistically achievable as possible. So if you are having a tough time getting along with kids or making time even to be with kids or being time with a romantic partner, instead of planning out a week by week schedule of how you're going to maximize your time with somebody, I would say start with one small change that lets you have a little bit more positive time with somebody. Similarly, with health, you're maybe not going to be able to change your sleeping patterns tomorrow. But if you can get yourself to creep upwards towards like 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, maybe that means going to bed 15 minutes earlier. Maybe it means drinking your last coffee of the day 15 minutes earlier. Make one small change and then focus on that first instead of getting overwhelmed by the feeling of needing to do everything at once. And I really believe that when we do that, we combine making our own well being and our family well being a resource for us, and we can take this bigger and more intentional perspective. It has long term and genuine impacts on our stress that can make it so we can manage the challenges that come just a little bit better. And I believe that that's the time that I have. So I'm happy if there's questions, I'll answer those, but I understand if I need to be done sometime soon. I'll stop sharing here.
Thank you, Jordan. I do want to let everyone know I did set it where you can unmute yourselves to ask questions over microphone, or feel free to ask questions through the chat window as well. I shared a link to our webinar survey in the chat window, so we appreciate you filling that out and letting us know how we're doing. Also, I do have a copy of the slides that Jordan shared today. So if you would like the slides, please email me or let me know, and I'll be glad to share those slides with you. We also have not scheduled our December webinar yet, but once that is scheduled and the topic selected, I will let everyone know through email and social media. Katie Hiddle says, great job. Thank you, Katie. Well, since I don't hear or seeing questions, I guess I will wrap up the webinar now. Thanks again, Jordan, for agreeing to speak to us and going over stress and mental health. We really appreciate all that you shared with us today, and I'm sure we'll have you on again at some point in the future.
It would be my pleasure to come back.
That would be great. So thanks everyone for joining us, and I'm going to end the webinar, and we will see you in December sometime.